Hey everyone, happy Friday. Today I'd like to talk about something a little bit sensitive, but surprisingly common and something you're likely to encounter either for yourself or a colleague in your career. And that's how do you take a role at a competitor without burning bridges? So today I want to touch base on three things. A little bit about your legal obligations to your contract, a little bit about how you actually leave, how do you exit with grace? And then finally, how do you succeed in your new role and not burn those bridges behind you? Now, before I dig into the details, I'd like to really hammer home how common this is. The reality is, as a seller, your biggest asset is your ability to communicate with and empathize with the market and the buyers. And what that means is if you know a specific buyer really, really well, if you move to another company where you're selling to that same buyer, there's a really good chance it's going to be a competitive product. Even if they're not directly competitive, you might be competing for the same budget. This happens all the time, and especially in large software companies like an Oracle, who has products that can sell into every vertical. They kind of compete with everyone. So no matter who you move on to, you're going to be competing. So first off, if you're in this situation or if a colleague's in this situation, don't panic. This happens all the time. It's very routine, and these rules of thumb will really serve you well. So first off, let's talk about your contract and your legal obligations. The first thing that often jumps out is a non-compete clause. You probably have something in your contract that says something like you won't take a role selling software in the same industry. Every jurisdiction is different, but by and large, across North America, those are not enforceable. Really, the few locations where they're enforceable is where the market is extremely small, and going to a competitor with confidential information in your head could cause irreparable harm, or where you're in a role where you're in possession of a lot of trade secrets and you're in a very unique position. So for example, if you were in the head of the search department at Google, part of that group of 10 who really knows how the algorithms work, you going on to a competitor could cause irreparable harm for the whole organization. But again, if we use that example at Google, if one sales rep moves on, it's really hard to say that's causing irreparable harm. So yes, that non-compete clause, for the most part, is generally unenforceable. So don't get stressed about that. There are, however, other clauses that are enforceable that you should pay attention to. The number one that you can get caught out on is the non-solicitation clause, and that usually has to do with employees and customers. Most common is something like 1 year after employment, you will not solicit any customers or any employees to leave. Pay attention to that one, because that is the easiest, fastest way to get yourself in hot water. If you were to leave company A to company B, and then start calling the customers of your old employer, company A, to try and pull them over, that's the kind of thing that can get you in trouble because you signed a contract saying you wouldn't do that. That's their customer, so please don't do that. Closely related is proprietary data. So a good way to think about it is that any of the information that they have for running their business is theirs. Don't take it. So you'll sometimes hear things like, well, if you're leaving, download your CRM contact database, make sure you export your sales scripts. Those things do belong to your employer. Even if you authored them while you were working at a company, you came up with a great sales cadence, that's still theirs. So don't take that. Don't try and download the contact list. Don't export all their sales enablement material, especially not trade secrets, things that they just keep confidential, like implementation processes. Just let those be. Now, the flip side, anything that's yours, that you purchased, is yours. So for example, your LinkedIn connections are yours. They can't ask you to delete those. If you signed up for a course and you got a lot of course material, that's yours. You don't need to leave that behind. So you can wipe that off your company computer. But yeah, proprietary data is a really big thing to watch for. Likewise, non-solicitations, those are big things that you can get into hot water later with, and employers will come after you if that happens, because that can be a dangerous precedent. So that's the number one. Your contract, pay attention to it. Number two, the process of leaving. How do you leave with grace? Let them know, give them notice, offer them a couple of weeks. Now, keep in mind, they probably won't take you up on that. The reality is most salespeople, if they're leaving a company, are leaving to a company that is somewhat competitive, which means generally in sales, when you let them know that you're leaving, they thank you and walk you out the door. So it's good to have your stuff in order before you let them know, but offer the notice. Don't be surprised if you're walked out, because they don't want you speaking to customers if you're going to turn around and bring that information to a competitor. So keep in mind when you let them know that you may just be walked out. Anything that you paid for, anything that you purchased, that's yours, so you can hold on to that. So Like you said, if you picked up books, ebooks, stuff like that, you can take that off your computer before you let them know. But likewise, anything that's theirs, expect to leave it behind. A key thing that's easily overlooked. If you have a home computer where you had things like access to the CRM, copies of email, sales scripts, things on your phone, wipe those. The best thing you can do is just get them out of the way so that there is no risk and avoids any kind of concern or complaints down the road. So exiting with grace. Let them know you're moving, let them know who you're moving on to. Be prepared to give feedback in an exit interview. Again, a lot of companies will want to know, was it the compensation? Was it the manager? Was it the strategy? Be ready with those answers. That'll be helpful. It'll make sure you're leaving on the right note. So, okay, we've covered your obligations. We've covered how you actually leave. How do you make sure you don't burn those bridges at your new employer? Number one, don't badmouth the previous employer. Now, when you get to a new position, you'll likely believe the new product is better, the new company is superior. That's part of the process, why you likely took the role. Don't spend the time bad-mouthing that previous employer. So a couple of reasons. The tech sales community is really tight. They'll find out. That's never going to do you any good. The second thing is boomerang employees are a real thing. You start at company A. You get a great offer going to company B. Maybe you learn new things about the product, the segment. You realize company A is actually really good. Well, all of those things that you learned about the market, about the space is valuable. There's a good opportunity to return to company A, and that happens all the time. I had one colleague I worked with who ended up working for Oracle 3 times because his company was either acquired or he took a job again back there. It's commonplace. Don't badmouth them because you don't know, you might be working with them again. Don't hold on to your negative impression too long. I mean, if you're leaving an opportunity for another, there's a good chance you don't have the best impression of where you started. Now, things change quickly. Sales teams grow, the marketplace grows, the tools that they have evolve. There's very few organizations in a company that change as quickly as sales. So yes, you might have negative impressions. There might be things you didn't like. Don't assume those stay in place. Shortly, you're going to see changes in your new place of work. Your old place of work will have been changing just as quickly. And then related, and this one is a really, really interesting one. Get yourself in the right mindset to be prepared to refer business. You see, if you're leaving one company for another, you've got a good idea of the relative strengths and weaknesses of the two solutions, the two companies. You are likely to spend time with customers who are better served by your old employer. Likewise, they'll likely encounter customers who are better served by your solution. If you can maintain an open mind, maintain those relationships with your previous colleagues, you will come across opportunities where you have a sale you know you can't win, but you can make that referral and help the customer out. It's not about helping the old employer, it's about helping that customer. And when you make that kind of a referral, that comes back to you in spades. So keep that open mind, keep those open pipelines of communication. Be prepared to refer because those referrals might come back to you, but more importantly, the customers will recognize it and they'll recognize that was you as a sales rep delivering value, not just the solution. So again, a bunch of things to keep in mind. Your legal obligations, exit with grace, and try not to burn those bridges. But most importantly, like I said at the beginning, this happens all the time. So don't get worried about it, be upfront about it, and be prepared. I'll let you walk you out, but keep that open door and keep positive. Anyways, if you have any questions about this or you ever want to dig into a specific scenario, let me know. Feel free to reach out to me, any of our instructors or partners. Always happy to dig in. In the meantime, again, happy Friday and happy selling. Ciao.